This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we are delighted to have Amy Peace with us here today. Is it Peace or Pease? I should have established that before we went live.
It's like please with the L taken out.
Pease, okay.
Hmm.
Amy Pease, sorry about
Hmm.
that. And she's going to be talking about the brand new book Wildwood, and we are receiving some signed copies here very shortly. She's been gracious enough to sign a batch of books for us. And so I'll go ahead and put a link in the comments field if anybody would like to reserve one. Also, if you have questions, go ahead and type them in, and Barbara will bring me on screen towards the end of the hour, and I'd be happy to ask any of your questions. So I think that's it. Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I'm really happy to talk to Amy again. We had a great conversation with her debut book, Northwoods, in which I recruited William Kent Kruger like the 59th hour,
Hmm.
or 59nd second rather, but Kent had given you a glowing review. And so
Hmm.
I knew that he had read your book and that if I asked him, and he was free, he'd be able to do it. So we had a terrific conversation.
Yeah, that was
But
a nice surprise for me.
yeah, well, I did my best. Anyway, there are certainly points of similarity. Sorry, I'm just getting something off my screen. Of similarity with Kent's work in terms of location. We're in the woods. It's northern. It's rural. It's all kinds of things. And
Mhm.
we have some really interesting characters. We have a damaged character called Eli. Or is that how you pronounce his name?
Eli.
Yep. And his mom, who is the sheriff and probably aging out slightly, but her lust for bringing justice and investigation has not dimmed. So, I mean, I'm really sympathetic with this at my age,
Yeah,
'cause how much can your body actually do, well, even
right.
if your spirit is bright? But so they're the police in Shaky Lake, Wisconsin, very rural area.
Hmm.
And it's Amy's book, so she can tell you what's going on here in Wildwood.
Sure. So Wildwood is the second book in the Northwoods series, and it picks up about a year after Northwoods leaves off. So this is Shaky Lake is a fictional northern Wisconsin resort town. So I don't know if people think of resorts when they think of northern Wisconsin, but there are many of them, and they're beautiful lake cabins, beautiful lakes and forests and all sorts of natural places. And um, they get really busy in the summer. This Northwoods is set in the summer, Wildwood is set in the fall. So a little bit different mood. And it is a story of a small town sheriff's department. So Marge is the sheriff. Her son Eli is pretty much her only deputy. And so they're stretched very thin. They do their best. And what happens is that Marge and Eli are called to the scene of a trailer home where it looks like there's been a murder, only there's no body. And next thing they know, the FBI and the DEA pull up outside the trailer home. And the FBI agent is Alyssa, who they actually worked with on a different case in Shaky Lake the summer before. So, of course, like the first case, what the crime that sort of sets things in motion ends up being just the tip of a much bigger iceberg. Um, and there's healthcare conspiracy, healthcare fraud. There is, I would say, good action scenes. My books are a lot about the characters and their relationships, so that is the same type of balance between character and plot as you'd see in Northwoods too. So, um, yeah, it's a police procedural set in the Northwoods.
Well, okay, that's a beer bottle. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. One of the things I like about the way Amy structures her books is that she has multiple narrators. So you have several points of view. You get to hear from Marge. We spent a lot of time in Eli's head. We hear from Alyssa. We hear from, um, and and that's not an easy thing to do, but I think that it really certainly enriches the characterization when it's not all filtered through just one narrative voice. So you write very tellingly about Eli and his PTSD. almost as though you'd experienced yourself or somebody you know has experienced it because he really had a terrible time in, I think it was Afghanistan, because he's not old enough for Iraq.
Hmm.
And that it's both a physical and moral injury. I'm not entirely clear what moral injury means, but I think it means that a person's psyche is severely wounded
Hmm.
by some horrendous event. And so he's been an alcoholic. Well, he is an alcoholic because if you are one, you always are one. But he had a terrible drinking problem, didn't know what to do, came home, and his mom gives him, structure in his life. He has a job because he lost his earlier job. Did he lose that job before he went into the service? Because he was working for what, Fish and Wildlife, wasn't that it?
Yeah, he was career U.S. Fish and Wildlife. He was a game warden. And then he got deployed to Afghanistan, came back, went back to that job, but the job was eliminated. And between that and what happened to him in Afghanistan really sent him down a spiral because up until then, he had not had mental health issues or substance abuse issues. So it was the trauma and then the loss of the job, and then things just went downhill for him. And the first book does focus on that part of his life. I mean, he's at the bottom of the barrel. He is really at the low point in his life, and the investigation in book one brings him through that. Um, but in the second book, I'm happy to say that he's doing a bit better.
Yes.
Um, I thankfully don't have first-hand hand experience with the things that Eli has been through, but I've been a healthcare provider for 25 years, so I have a pretty good, albeit outsider's perspective on mental illness and substance abuse. And I've always aimed to make the characters and the situations as realistic and plausible as I can, including things like emotional things too. I mean, obviously, I want to get the facts right, but I want things to be honest and accurate as much as possible.
Well, you do a wonderful job being inside Eli's head. Because of his drinking and all, he'd lost a lot of weight. His wife asked him to move out. He's very attached to his child, but he's now gained back some weight, not drinking, and he's actually accepted, if I recall, he has accepted some mental health professional counseling, and that's also helped him to avoid,
Yes.
you know, obvious traps like, well, I've been, sober now for 40 days, so one drink won't hurt me.
Right.
Right. So you do bring all of that in. Now, Alyssa has a different set of problems.
Mhm.
She's not suffering from that kind of injury, but she has a fiance who is not back home in Chicago, I think it is, who's not entirely sympathetic with her career choice, and the
No.
fact that she's in danger and other things. And that seems to come up quite often when you're dealing with cops or you know, military thrillers see this and all too, where people really are physically in danger, seriously physically in danger, and their loved ones or their partner just can't accept that. It's also a
Yeah.
problem if you give a female sleuth, or occasionally a male, a very young child, because then readers are going, wait, who's going to care for the baby? And
Yeah.
can you really risk your life if you're going to,
Yeah, that does add an extra element
yeah.
of, room for judgment because I probably would be at least wondering, if how I wonder how my family even takes care of the kids and does all this stuff when we have jobs, let alone jobs where we have to work odd hours or in physical danger. So it's tricky enough without having those sorts of dynamics. But yeah, Alyssa has a fiance back in Chicago. They've been together forever. And, maybe the writing's on the wall there, but neither she nor her fiance really want to read that writing on the wall. So she and Eli have had sort of an unusual friendship since the first book because she was called to help out with the investigation in the first book. And she got to experience Eli when he was really hitting rock bottom. And on the other hand, she'd only known him for a day or two. And yet here she was in the mix when he's going through this difficult time where he's at his most vulnerable, and it created a sort of unusually intimate relationship, friendship with them, that is carried on in the second book.
Right. And, it's perfectly possible that you have a male and female friendship. You don't have to take it, it's up to you. Or maybe it's up to them if you write more about them. Sometimes the characters run away with you. But,
Yeah.
I mean, it is more than possible to just have a really strong friendship. The larger problem for Alyssa is really whether she can live with somebody who, doesn't want her to do the job that she so clearly loves. Now,
Mhm.
Eli's mother, on the other hand, Marge, I think is really, really a good mother and, has not smothered Eli, nor has she abandoned him. She's
Mhm.
walked a pretty good ground, I think, dealing with him.
Yeah, because in Northwoods, he was probably not very easy to live with. He was drunk all the time and making all these bad decisions. And she's still worried about him. You
Right.
know, he's somebody who you see the trope a lot where there's the wounded warrior. And a lot of times that happens in crime fiction where the main character is former military or traumatized in some way. Like it's a super, super common trope. And Eli is similar, the difference being that instead of, being rude or grumpy or standoffish, he's trying to hide all of this and make it seem like everything is okay because he doesn't want anyone else to suffer because of him. So he's, kind of a golden retriever a little bit, and I think that that is somewhat how he naturally is anyway. Like
Yeah.
before his trauma, I think he was naturally a golden retriever anyway. But he's been trying to cover that up.
Well, I think he's a really interesting and sympathetic character, despite, the things. I mean, sometimes that can really put you off. I'm not a fan of alcoholics, so but that doesn't rule him, and I think he's doing a great job trying to get it all under control. Let's talk about Trinity because Trinity is yet another voice in this, even though she is the occupant of the trailer who,
Yes.
in
I
the
don't know
bloodbath that
why.
is left, appears to have been murdered.
I don't know why I have now this is Northwoods and Wildwood have this third point of view character. This actually is a fourth point of view character where that's a flashback.
Mhm.
And the investigation that Eli and Marge have is an investigation of what happened to Trinity. Trinity's trailer was the one that they found, all covered in blood.
Right.
And so I've always liked more the thriller element, but also the investigation element. And so if you're just doing the investigation, you don't see the drama of the crime play out chronologically. And so what I've done in both of these books is had little flashback,
Mhm.
just snippets from the point of view of, in this case, Trinity. In the previous book, it was a person named Calvin. Um, and so I kind of do that and try and then thread the two times and the two points of view together right around the beginning of the third act. So like as we're heading into the climax of the book. And so that's what I did with Trinity too.
Well, you actually, I mean, she says like an origin story. I mean, you start her out way back
Mhm.
before the action in this book, and you introduce the second character. His name I can't remember. This other woman, what's her name?
Oh,
Rhonda. I'm sorry, I could look it up.
I, I'm
But
blanking on
Ronnie,
it
Ronnie,
too.
her name is Ronnie.
Ronnie. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you hear from Trinity who had very controlling parents, made some bad choices, dropped out of college, got into drugs, just kind of torpedoed her life. Ronnie, she meets her in a like a halfway house or whatever it is,
Yep.
and so you really have two of them, not just Trinity, but we hear from Ronnie, and what it comes down to is that Trinity turns into a confidential informant, right?
Yes.
And so that's why the FBI are showing up because Trinity has been their confidential informant. And when this trailer is discovered covered under blood and so forth, the FBI naturally arrived to find out what's happened to her. Now, what's really interesting about this book, and that Amy could not entirely predict this, is that it's publishing at a time when, at least in Minnesota, we are hearing about enormous medical fraud. And we've had that experience here in Arizona some years ago, not even that far back, where similarly Native Americans were brought down to Phoenix. I think it was just Phoenix, probably not Tucson. And there was considerable medical fraud there in terms of supporting, supposedly giving them treatment and all, but they were more or less kidnapped
Yes,
and kept
yes.
really almost kept against their will. And I was saying before we started to Patrick and Amy that Anne Hillerman, her last book, took part of that. Part of the plot was constructed around how vulnerable these people were and how unwittingly they contributed to this medical fraud. And the other thing that's frightening is just how much money there is.
Oh,
I
yes.
mean, it's millions and millions of dollars that you can set up if you go about it. And I thought, Amy, you did a good job explaining the mechanics of, because that is part of the plot of how that fraud actually works. Obviously, you've got, with your background in healthcare and all, you would know that, but I hadn't really thought all that much about how you would go about setting up that fraud and why Medicare would have such a hard time catching it. And you explain why that's true.
Yeah. So I think there are a couple different types of fraud, healthcare fraud in Wildwood. And one of them is what's called a phantom clinic, and which is the long and short of it is identity theft.
Mhm.
So there is a supposed organization that collects name, identity information, and insurance information from people without their knowledge and starts billing for services, procedures, medications that are never delivered, that never exist, that the person themselves never even knows about. Um, and yes, the government does audits for things like Medicare, but oftentimes it is slow in coming or it's after the fact, like they'll pay the Medicare claims and then Medicare later will go back and audit. So there's a lot of room for smash and grab operations. There's a lot of different ways that you can f be fraudulent with healthcare. The other one in Wildwood is halfway houses. So, like as you mentioned, that's sometimes called sober living facilities or just psychiatric facilities in general. And one of the ways that I got the idea for that part was that I had read some article about sober living facilities and the fraud schemes. And part of it is that there's very, very little regulation and oversight into what you need to do to call yourself a rehab facility. Um, I mean, practically, you just put out a shingle that says sober living, and then you can start billing
Right.
insurance. And so these companies would set up these sober living facilities. They would have people, usually folks who were addicted, go out and try to find other people who were addicted, but who had insurance. And then they would bring them back. They would not run all sorts of diagnostic tests like urine drug screens every day, but not actually run them, but get paid for all of that stuff. Um, they would use the people that were in that sober living facility in forced labor situations. So it's not only fraud, but it's also human trafficking. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about with the thing that happened in Phoenix. But that's also part of Wildwood. It's like the whole big preying on the vulnerable.
Right. It's really true. But, I mean, it's not always a victimless crime because if you have taken somebody's identity and Medicare has kicked in all kinds of money based on billing for that person, then what happens if that person really is ill and, goes somewhere and
Mhm.
suddenly their insurance is like, run out or,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be certainly a way that Medicare would you know, notice that something had gone on. But I don't know that the victim there, I mean, I hadn't really thought about it, but supposing that were true, supposing some person showed up at the ER or whatever it is, or at Banner Health, and, and they'd already Medicare had already paid a fortune for
Yeah.
health care for this person. What would happen? Would the
Well,
hospital absorb it? Would Medicare absorb it? Would the person have to prove that there had been fraud and they were not actually the person, you know, that received or in theory, received the fraudulent care?
right. Well, in the Phantom Clinic scheme in Wildwood, those folks could get care elsewhere. They probably would never know that they were being billed for these other services by this Phantom Clinic.
Right.
Yeah, because you can go wherever with Medicare or Medicaid for the most part, and um, you could be getting care there with your knowledge and care at this fake place without your knowledge.
Yep. Well, I know that some health plans, have providers. I mean, you're limited to what they call the network or whatever it
Mhm.
is. You can't go out of it. And maybe in part that's a way to try to, maintain or a control over what's going on.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
yeah. Anyway, there's just an incredible amount of money sloshing around out there and,
Yeah.
fraudsters everywhere. COVID accelerated that. There were all kinds of, we know there, were many frauds established during COVID where people submitted claims. So the thing is, it's just that it's so big and the government can only keep so much of an eye on it. So
Mhm.
if you're clever and stay beneath the radar, don't get too greedy, you probably can prosper.
Absolutely. And I think it makes for really good, sinister, chilling villains when it comes to crime fiction because these are people that we trust, you know, healthcare providers, doctors, you name it. They're people that we trust to do the right thing to help people. And when that trust is broken, I think it sits a certain way.
Definitely. So there are other morally gray characters in this book. One of whom is actually the FBI people because they have set Trinity up to be a CI. And basically, what that means is they want her to use sex to seduce a person they have identified as possibly part of this. We don't know it for sure, obviously, but as
Yeah.
part of this fraud scheme, a lawyer. And
Yeah. So a lot of, there are some loose ends at the end of Northwoods, at the end of the first book, and they are picked up at the beginning of Wildwood. One of the loose ends is a lawyer named Charles Dawson, and the FBI and the DEA have some notion that he's involved in this criminal conspiracy or organization that they've been trying to uncover for some time now. But they just can't, the organization just is not making any mistakes and they
right,
can't get a foot in the door to figure out how to get to the bottom of all this. And it's the DEA agent, whose name is Adam, who gets the idea to use a confidential informant, to use Trinity,
ah,
to have Trinity is assigned to have a fake relationship with this lawyer, Charles Dawson, and use that as a way to get insider scoop on the information on the organization, especially who is running the organization. Because right now they know that Charles Dawson is not the top of the heap, but they don't know who his boss is. And so that's a big question mark throughout this mystery.
right. It is the DEA. I'm slandering the FBI. Sorry about that, FBI. Nonetheless, this is sort of a classic role for women. I mean, you read spy stories where women are sent in, to bars to seduce people, and, it's more or less using sex, to
Mhm.
gain information and control. And I'm only going to say that I think Amy does something really interesting with that relationship, which is one of the things I enjoyed about Wildwood. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I try to keep it, I try not to make the villain too much of a mustache twirler. I want us to be able to understand how we could have how this person that's doing such bad things, we could even like them in some contexts, to have that conflict. And I know that Trinity has a lot of that conflict with this relationship that she's essentially forced into.
Well, yeah, because the threat is that if she, she could wind up with jail time as a offender. So I mean, people don't become CIs easily because it's
Right. And she
dangerous.
has she has a secret motivation for going along with this
Right.
pressure to be a CI that we don't learn right away. And
Very
once we
good.
learn that reason, then it becomes a little bit more apparent why the stakes are so high for her.
Yes, there are many layers in this book. I think it's easy to think if you read a lot of crime fiction that, maybe these are ordinary tropes or beats, but they aren't. And that's really very rewarding, I think, for somebody like me who reads so much of it, to be
Yeah.
surprised, which I
Yeah.
love.
Well, you read much more than I do and probably more crime fiction. So I'm glad to hear that mine wasn't just, kind of more of the same.
No, no, not at all. And well, you're also, I think, your prose is extremely well suited to the book. It's a pleasure to read your writing. And,
Oh, thanks.
I read for voice and I read for prose. Plot doesn't matter to me nearly as much. Then I read for character, possibly, probably I then read for the scenery of the crime,
Okay.
because I love it when the place is essentially a character, which is
Hmm.
true, for your books. And so the last thing I read for is plot. And yet, I'm surrounded by books and readers and been particularly true since Gone Girl, where people are reading it almost just for the plot. I just read a book,
Yeah.
I won't describe who it is or who wrote it, but there's nobody in it to like. Not a single person in this book is likable because it's all in devotion to, betrayal and the twist. And I really don't enjoy reading that kind of fiction, and I think it's becoming even more prevalent as it needs to be more outrageous. I mean, it reminds me of after the Da Vinci Code when we got nothing but religious conspiracy thrillers forever. I called them Da Vinci clones for a long time, but it became very tired because the tropes were essentially the same. And I'm feeling that at the moment, the twisty novel is getting more and more outrageous in
Hmm.
order to, I mean, it's like social media clicks, whatever it is. So I'm really delighted when I get to read a more traditional mystery, where I can like people. I mean, Eli's a complicated character and he has his flaws, but he's really likable. His mother's really likable,
Yeah. That's funny
you
that you say
care
that
about
because
them.
the plot uh is the hardest part for me. So the plot is the hardest part. The police procedural stuff, well, I mean, I'm a healthcare worker. I don't know anything about police investigations other than what I can find from maybe chatting with some people, but more likely just looking it up online. Also keeping the investigative stuff sort of vague so that it's at least plausible.
Yeah, right.
Um, I figure plausible. If I can get plausible, I'm satisfied. But what I do know and what I enjoy as a reader too are those characters, those relationships, that sense of um, being transported to a place that maybe I haven't been before. I really like that too. So all the things that you described, I especially like. I would never be good at coming up with great twists. Sometimes I see these twists in some of these thrillers and I'm like, well, I wouldn't have known how to do that. So I just stick with what I'm better at, which is the characters. And I think there's a lot of drama and a lot of interest in characters and relationships. I personally really like reading romance novels, and maybe it shows in how much I put into the characters and the relationships in my crime fiction books.
I'm sure it does. I like reading romance as well, and I like biography. I've always been, because I'm an historian by training, and I've always loved biography. And you have to care about the character in a biography or a memoir, or why are you reading it?
Yes.
If it's somebody you don't like or somebody that didn't you don't admire, or whatever, then there's no point in spending any time on it. And yes, I think you have a real gift for characterization, but I also think this is an extremely well constructed plot with surprise elements in it. So,
Yeah.
Good for you. Yay.
Thank you. This was the first book that I had to write on deadline. And
Ah,
I think that Northwoods, the first book, took me probably 5 years to write. Um, Very part-time mostly. But this one, I had a little bit less than a year. I had set myself up for headache by having those loose ends at the end of Northwoods. So I had this idea when I wrote Northwoods that it would be like there would be crime elements that continued throughout the series and just carrying threads along book to book. And I really wish I had not done that because it made it a lot more difficult trying to write the second book when I had pigeonholed myself into certain plot elements. I'm glad that you think I pulled it off. I feel after the fact I felt good about it, but during the process of writing this book, I was really sweating that.
well, you have an excellent editor in Emily Bessler.
Mhm.
Her books generally are superior in terms of plot and character. I think she cares a lot about both. She publishes a lot of big military thrillers, big books with complicated plots. But that's not all.
Yeah.
There's a wide variety. But I'm generally happy with books that come from her, and I'm assuming either Emily or one of the editors that works with her is somebody that you spent time with and would
Yes, Laura Jones is my editor that I spend the most time with, and she's great. And she told me because I gave her the probably third draft of Wildwood. It would have been like a little over a year ago now, and I was just like, I don't think this is very good. You're gonna have to help me because this just seems like a mess. I can't figure out where the characters' brains are at right now. And I was in a tizzy about it, to say the least. And she thankfully was like, nope, this is good. I think you're looking at this from a perspective that maybe is a little bit flustered and stressed, but this is good. And what had happened is that because I was on a deadline, I decided to outline the book ahead of time, which I did not do with Northwoods. Northwoods was very written by the seat of my pants. But I outlined Wildwood, and in doing so, yes, it helped me get the plot, but I didn't know where the characters' brains were at. And I know Eli and Alyssa and Marge so well, and yet I still didn't know where they were at emotionally during this book and until the very end. And I was really sweating that. I thought, what happens if I can't figure out their inner workings, if I'm just doing plot mechanics?
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's a really scary thought. And, second book syndrome is a real thing. It
Yeah.
truly is. And in general, I mean, I've talked to debut authors, over from 36 years, almost everybody who has had a career in crime fiction, it turns out, signed their first book for us, with very rare exceptions, because um, I really like debuts. I'm constantly reading, giving them priority, looking for talent, wanting them to succeed. And I know how hard it is, especially if you've had a successful first book, to write a second book. There's a self-doubt element. There's a expectation, a weight of expectation element, where you think, well, people love my first book, but can I possibly do this again? And it's just really hard. And sales tend to go that way too, just so you know. They tend to be, reasonable for a first book because people are curious. They almost always slump for a second book, and then they start ticking up again towards the third. So if you find that to be true, it will not be a rare experience. It's not about you. It's just kind of the norm that it
Yeah.
goes that way. Because readers are always looking for the next new thing and they find you and it's wonderful and all. And then, you know, it takes them a little while to decide sometimes whether, um, usually third or fourth book, whether they really are going to invest in the author or the series. That's not always true, but generally so. I had an interesting
Well,
conversation with Laura Dave and Riley Sager on Tuesday, and she had such a huge success with the last time I saw him, but it was her sixth fifth book, maybe. It
Mhm.
wasn't her first book. And
Mhm.
even then, the effort to write the follow-up book, because she felt that it deserved a sequel, but also it turns out a sequel is a prequel.
Mhm.
The weight of that was just as horrendous as if the first time I saw him had been her first book,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's writing is an odd thing. It is a really odd activity. It's certainly a very odd career compared to things like what I have always done, which is just, I'm a nurse practitioner. I go into my work, I take care of my patients. There's not any sort of entrepreneurial aspect or promotional aspect of it. It is not creative. I mean, I suppose I have to get creative in a sense when I'm trying to come up with ways to help folks, but not in this sort of way.
Right.
Um, but it's really fun, and I think obviously I enjoy it enough to keep doing it because it is a lot of work, but it's really rewarding, and it's delayed gratification to the extreme. Like to an extreme. I finished writing Wildwood a year and a half ago, and now it's out just this week. So that's just the
You're
way it
absolutely right.
goes.
That didn't used to be true, but as corporate publishing has become more corporate, it used to be that books were turned in and appeared much more quickly. It used to be that we were surprised. I mean, this is the third, I'm at the 36th year halfway point, so coming up to 37 years. And I can remember back when we started that we would open boxes and be surprised. That there would be books in it that we hadn't heard of, that we hadn't read. It would all be surprised. Now, I had a sales rep from one publisher apologize to me today for the fact that she had had to ask me to order books through next August and to order some promotional through next August. And it's January. I don't care. I can't even get that far. And so it's the same thing. What I miss the surprise element because for me, by the time your book gets here, you know, um, it's old news for me. Although
Yeah.
in your case, not because I didn't get a copy of it. So in your case, it
There
was.
you go.
But
That's
but
a
for an awful lot of books, I have them all lined up looking across the room. I get maybe 150, 200 advanced reading copies a month. And I sort through them, and some I know on the surface I'm probably never going to read or not going to be right for our store, whatever it is. And right now there's this surge into horror, which is not um, a genre that I enjoy. I don't need to scare myself. And so right at the moment, there's a huge wave of both the cozy and the horror. They're like opposite poles, but it's all
Mhm.
escapism, engendered by the general mess that we are in. And so I eliminate those because I'm just not going to read them. I can mention them that we have them the whole bit, but I'm not going to read them. But still, I come down to, probably 100 books that I'm going to touch
Mhm.
through the course of promoting the month, which is why next August is just so daunting. I mean, it's like I
Oh
have
my gosh, I can't
800 books to
imagine.
go before I ever get there. But you're right, the delayed gratification for you as an author and for a reader is I'm the one who's missing the surprise. The reader is not missing the surprise. Although, what's also interesting, we have really devoted customers and readers, and we had to figure out the other day, what do we do with people who are ordering books not out till 2027 or not out till next fall? How do we get them into our software? How do we reserve against them? Are they going to be autographed? Is the author going to come here? I can't, I don't know what's going to happen in October. And so we're trying to come up with some way to, you know, capture those orders and make those readers happy and not disappoint them if they think, oh, well, it's going to be this. And then it turns out not to be. It's so you're not alone in
Yeah.
the wishing that things happened sooner.
Yeah. Well, I have learned that when you've got a book with your editor, you start working on the next book while you're waiting.
Absolutely. You
So
do.
I have I have book three in the Northwoods series, actually, which I don't have a title for yet, but the draft is with my editor right now.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and that one is Eli, Marge, and Alyssa, but it is starting from scratch in a way. The conspiracy with Northwoods and Wildwood is fully wrapped up at the end of
Right.
Wildwood. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Right.
I learned that the hard way. If any new authors or aspiring authors are wondering like what not to do, I would say trying to have a crime series where you have criminal plot elements thread past multiple books.
Well, I'm sure it's hard for you, but it actually makes them, I think, a very interesting pair. I mean, in a way, you don't leave the reader hanging because there is resolution in
Yeah.
Northwoods, but you do leave the reader wondering, about elements and therefore maybe more eager to read the next book. David
Well,
Bell actually just did a really very interesting thing with the new series start. He doesn't finish the book.
oh,
And
well,
so you have to wait till April to find out, what happens.
I learned with Northwoods that there are a lot of people who really don't like loose ends,
Hmm.
really, really do not like loose ends. And what
Ah.
happened is that Northwoods was a single book deal, but my publisher knew that I intended it to be a series, and they were like, we're definitely interested in the series, but let's just do one book for now. So when Northwoods came out, we couldn't put anything on there saying it's part of a series because who knew if it would end up being part of a series. So I guess my editor and myself and everyone involved thought it was really clear at the end of Northwoods that there's more to come. But what I learned is that many readers are like, well, how am I supposed to know that? Like I don't see another book out. I don't see anything saying this is a series. So I learned also that people get really mad about loose ends at the end of a book, or at least at the end of a crime book, because different genres have different
Well,
expectations, of
they
course.
do. But on the other hand, had it been presented as the first in a series, then much of that would have been eliminated. So,
Yes, yes,
it's not entirely the loose end problem. It was will there be a second book problem, which
yes.
which does come up with single book things. You'll also find, I think, that as you move along, that promotion and just the work of being an author, the business of being an author will take up more of your time.
Yes, and thankfully I have really, really enjoyed all of the in-person and like video events that I've done, and I've done a ton of in-person events, especially because the Wisconsin library system has been incredibly supportive of Northwoods and Wildwood. I got um, they gave me their annual prize for fiction this year, the Wisconsin Library Association, and just the getting the book into library patrons' hands, hosting events. I had one event at the Oostburg Public Library, and they had decked out the little meeting room to look like a Northwoods tavern. So they
Oh.
had brought like a wooden bar from the 70s from someone's basement. They had put up the sign that they had to announce the event would look like a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer thing, but it was like my name. And they put some taxidermied fish on the wall and some fishing poles and served fake old fashions, which old fashions are huge in Wisconsin for like a cocktail. It was so amazing.
That's wonderful. How I envy you. Our library here is absolutely indifferent to
Mm.
working with a bookstore. We are the bookstore in Scottsdale, so it's not like they have to choose.
Mhm.
They just do not want to get involved in it, and it breaks my heart. I am a librarian, and I really feel like it's a disservice to our community that, I just did a thing to work with a library north of us in Cave Creek. And, it makes me sad that the Scottsdale Library, just is
Yeah.
not willing to extend itself this way. I'm gonna work on that. But you
Yeah.
and Craig Johnson, I know, have had Craig has been to every library in Wyoming as far as I can work out.
Oh yeah.
And
I mean,
Kent
I suppose
Kruger.
the number of libraries in Wyoming is probably a little bit lower than in other states.
It may well be because there are fewer people, but Ken Kruger is wonderful about doing,
Yeah.
library events and all. And I admire you authors who are willing to, travel in your home state and support your own library
Yeah.
systems. I
I
think
love
it's
it.
really important.
I've always been okay speaking in front of folks, but I find it's just really, really fun and energizing to get out and talk to people. And I think about how in my regular quote unquote day job, which I still have pretty much full time, I don't get to talk to people on a professional level about fictional characters. I don't get to talk about make believe. And it's so fun to get to go out and talk to people about my books, the stuff I imagined in my mind, even just the fact that people have read my imaginary story always still blows my mind.
I think it's wonderful that because not all writers enjoy their fans or enjoy their
Mhm.
public. So it's wonderful that you're able to do that. Patrick, before we wear everybody out, why don't you pop back in and see if you have questions or if we got any questions from the audience?
Okay, let's see here. Yeah, there's a question about Amy, do you plan on doing any physical real life events in other parts of the country?
Yes, sure. You know what? My sister lives in San Diego. I think I might do some Southern California book stuff one of these times. Um, I'm gonna try to do this is in a different part of the country, but there are a lot of libraries way up north in Wisconsin. I live in Madison in the South, that want me to do events, and I think this summer maybe I'll do a northern Wisconsin tour, and maybe I'll include Minnesota or like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in that too.
That would be wonderful. But of course, you still have a day job. It's not
I
as
do still have
easy
a
for
day
you.
job.
Yeah. And in healthcare, where continuity is important.
Yeah, I'll make something work.
Great.
Let's see. Okay, someone asks, Amy, if second book syndrome is a real thing, how's book three going?
I was very glad to be able to start from scratch with book three with no plot threads that I had to really be a slave to. So I feel really good about the third book. I don't know though. I haven't gotten back feedback yet from my editor. So we'll see if it's just good in my head or if someone else actually enjoys the plot too.
Let's see. Here's a standard question. Who are some of your favorite authors and what are you reading now?
My favorite contemporary authors are Colson Whitehead, Rebecca Makkai, Amor Towles. And right now, what am I reading? I'm reading a book called The Plot. And honestly, I can't recall the name of the
Wonderful book.
author.
It's Jean Hanff Corlitz, I think.
Yes, there you go.
It's
Yes,
a terrific book. I loved it.
yes.
It's not a new book. It was out
No.
a while back,
Mm-mm.
and she very kindly signed a batch of them for us when it came out, but I thought it was brilliant.
It's really good. And then I'm listening on audio to The Road to Tender Hearts by Annie Hartnett. I
Sure.
can't recall, but that book is wonderful and funny, and it's really good on audiobook.
Let's see. How are your dogs doing?
My older boy is 15 and a half years old, and he's in great shape. I didn't know dogs could live this long, but he's great. And then my other dog is good. And then I managed to convince my husband to get a cat this spring. So we got a cat.
Uh-huh. Let's
Was that
see.
my mom asking about the dogs?
Well, may have been. Um, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
Let's see. Are you doing any of the conventions coming up? Any of the mystery conventions?
Well, I think I'll go to Calgary for BoucherCon, but that's not till the fall.
No, it's
Uh,
in October. We're signed up to go too.
yeah, I'll go to that one. Nothing, I do have events, but I don't think off the top of my head I have any conferences. Um, I mean,
When's
I love
Left
going
Coast
to them.
Prime? Is
Well,
Left
Left
Coast
Coast
coming?
Prime is in San Francisco, Patrick, so I don't know that it really fits um, in Amy's schedule. It's also the end of February. So
Uh,
Hmm.
it's coming up fairly quickly. It's the last weekend in February.
Right.
I will miss it this year because I'm going to be in Singapore.
Mhm.
But I like left coast crime. I like smaller conventions. Calgary will probably not be super gigantic
Mhm.
for About Your Con. At least I hope not.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm looking forward to that. I haven't been to Canada in forever. It's been probably 20 years since I've been anywhere in Canada. So I'll go to that one.
good.
Wonder
Well,
how many writers will defect.
Yeah.
Won't
I don't
come
know.
back.
I got kids back here, so I probably should come home.
It's in Left Coast is in Santa Fe the following year, I understand.
oh, is it back in Santa Fe?
I
Great.
think so. I think so.
Okay, well, that'd be a good chance to go. Yeah.
I think I could go to Santa Fe. That sounds good.
Um, that's about it as far as questions.
All right. Well, Amy, what a pleasure to talk to you again and a real joy to read Wildwood. I,
Thank you so much for having me. It's so
oh,
fun to see you again. It's a nice little program. It was 2 years ago that I talked to you before.
that's right. No, I
Yeah,
looked it up because I felt, I lose track of time sometimes. And,
me
because I
too.
remember our conversation really well.
Hmm.
Also, it is archived on our website. So I'll try to remember to send you a link because
Okay.
you and Kent had such a wonderful conversation about
Oh,
Northwood.
yes.
It'd be fun. So you can use that on your own social media to
Wonderful.
acquaint your fans with it and so forth. So Amy has signed our books. They're actually in her office right now, and they're
Right over
heading
there.
our way tomorrow. So
Yep.
do please order one. I think you will love it, and especially since Northwoods was one of our first mystery picks. So lots of copies got sold.
All
Anyway,
my beta readers and so everyone so far said they like Wildwood better. So hopefully that's um that's a good reason to pick up the second book in the series if you've read the first one too.
well, I don't think I'd say better, but certainly as much.
Yeah.
I think they make an excellent pair.
Yeah.
And now when you're going to start off with a fresh plot slate for book number three, I think it might encourage more people to read the first two together as a
Yeah.
pair. There's my dog saying, "It's time, Mom." All right. Good night. Thanks
Good
very much
night.
for
Thanks
joining
so
us.
much.
All right.
Uh-huh. Good
Bye.
night, everybody. Good night, Patrick.